thank you, Tim. Appreciate you coordinating this event today. Very much appreciate all those on the phone and the Teams call who have made the time to attend. This will be our first quarter of the new fiscal 2022 year State Technical Committee. We try and have these State Technical Committees every quarter to let you know what we're doing and engage your thoughts and acquire your advice on how we can better move conservation out in the Commonwealth of PA. So today we have two guest speakers that are going to be presenting on some conservation innovation grants that NRCS has funded in the past, and these projects are complete, and we thought that after seeing them, they're really great, and we thought, well, we'd share these what's come back from these groups with the public and with you to make sure that you're aware of all the good work that they've done. And so today we have Jamie Morrell, Mid-Atlantic Director for American Farmland Trust, and she's going to be speaking on women landowners for conservation and water quality in Pennsylvania. She has done a lot of work with focus group meetings, and so we thought that would be very interesting discussion. And as well as Joe Sweeney, who's the Executive Director of the Water Science Institute that's associated with Franklin Marshall College in Lancaster County. Joe's going to be on the call today to showcase a new, very neat tool on legacy sediment, and he's calling it the Legacy Sediment 2.0 Decision Support Tool. So with that said, welcome, Jamie and Joe. And Jamie, if you want to begin, that would be great. Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Denise, and thank you, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully this will work.
I'm not seeing it yet, Jamie. There's a box at the top right corner with an arrow pointing up. If you click on that, and then you have to select the screen or item that you want to share. And
so I've done that, and I can see the slides on my screen. Can you see it on yours?
I'm not seeing it yet on my end. And I have your presentation, so I can share the slides if you'd like, and you could just let me know when to. Oh, wait, here we go. Maybe it's loading.
Okay.
Bear with us 1 second, Jamie. Thanks.
Okay.
I'm still not seeing it here.
We couldn't start the presentation, it says. All right, well,
let me share your slides if that's okay.
That sounds great.
Okay, very good.
We might need to, I did reorder one of the slides, so we might need to hunt around a little bit, but
that's fine.
Shouldn't be too complicated. Wonderful. All right. So y'all see the first slide here?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks again for having me today. I'm thrilled to be here to talk a little about the American Farmland Trust's Women for the Land initiative and our recently concluded Women Landowners for Conservation and Water Quality in Pennsylvania. I'm Jamie Mira, Mid-Atlantic Regional Director at the American Farmland Trust. I oversee AFT's programming in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. All right, Tim. Thank you. AFT is a national nonprofit founded in 1980, and we work to save the land that sustains us by protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. Today, I'll give just a brief overview of a project that AFT and our partners recently concluded that was generously funded by a Pennsylvania NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant I want to thank NRCS for your support and partnership in this work, and particularly Susan Perry and Denise Coleman. So thank you very much. Over the past 3 decades, women have entered agriculture in unprecedented numbers. Increasingly, women own farmland, are new farmers, and have become more involved in all aspects of agriculture. Next slide, please. Currently, women own or co-own 1/3 of all US farmland. Pennsylvania mirrors these trends with more than 30,000 women farmers owning and operating 2.3 million acres of farmland in Pennsylvania. Over the next 20 years, hundreds of millions of acres of farmland are expected to change hands as farmers retire or leave their land to the next generation. And during that time, women farmers and landowners are likely to significantly increase in numbers. Now, despite their growing numbers, women are underrepresented in farmland conservation programs that provide advice, funds, and resources needed to be successful stewards of working lands. Many conservation programs target farmers, but not landowners. Women farmers and landowners are an incredibly important ally. Research shows that many women farmers and landowners typically have very strong conservation ethic and are deeply committed to healthy farmland and communities. However, women in agriculture face some unique barriers to stewarding their farmland. Studies show that barriers to non-farming women landowners include lack of access to information, training, and tools, and particularly to government conservation programs. Next slide, please. Women also cite gender dynamics as a significant barrier in managing their land. They often feel excluded and not taken seriously by men they work with to implement new conservation practices. These barriers negatively impact their ability to conserve their land and to protect soil and water health. As women become significant decision makers in Pennsylvania agriculture, their actions will have a major impact on the environment and economy. So AFT's Women for the Land initiative helps women in agriculture access conservation programs and adopt environmentally sound farming practices. Next slide, please. Our work combines research to help us understand women farmers and landowners, who they are, the barriers they face, and the resources that they need and want. Our work combines engagement and support of women in agriculture through peer-to-peer learning and on-the-ground projects, as well as policy to reach more women in agriculture. Next slide. The Women for the Land initiative is active in 11 states across the country. Next slide, please. And we're active here in the Mid-Atlantic in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. This shows some of the counties where we've been active. I apologize, this slide is a bit old, so we need to go in and update this, but here you get a sense of where we've been. And the Conservation Innovation Grant that I'm speaking about today enabled AFT to bring our Women for the Land initiative to Pennsylvania. So this was our first foray into Pennsylvania with this programming, which is very exciting. Next slide, please. So the goal of this project was to help women landowners and farmers in Pennsylvania realize their conservation vision for their land. Next slide, please. We did this by informing women how to access government conservation programs and related technical and funding assistance, and physically introducing them to conservation professionals in their area. We connected them to other women landowners and farmers who face similar challenges, spurring the creation of a local support network. We educated them about the environmental and economic benefits of specific conservation practices and how to implement those practices on their farmland. And we empower them in their relationships with their tenant farmers, giving them more confidence in expressing their desire for how their land should be managed and stewarded. All right, Tim, next slide, please. And for those of you looking, put your sunglasses on because it's going to be a bright one. So in terms of where we focused our efforts, we focused in on 5 counties, which you see in the central southern part of Pennsylvania, in Adams, Dauphin, Lebanon, Perry, and York. And we brought women in these counties together through conservation learning circles. Next slide, please. Conservation learning circles are well-tested, a well-tested approach to that's really pioneered by the Women, Food, and Agriculture Network. They provide a safe space for women to learn and to build networks. Next slide, please. We hosted 5 learning circles on the topics you see here: regenerative agriculture practices, farm conservation plans, finding and listing land and small farms programs, funding for conservation easements and woodland conservation. And through these learning circles, we engaged more than 60 presenters and partners from local and state agricultural and conservation entities. We rely heavily, work in partnership to a very large extent, and rely on the expertise and connections of our partners in the localities where we host. So that's a very important piece of this. I'll talk more about this in a moment when I touch on the challenges and opportunities of implementing this project, but I will mention here that initially we had planned to host these learning circles in person and got very, very far in the process of planning and coordinating logistics around this. And because of the COVID pandemic, we had to quickly pivot to virtual learning circles, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Next slide, please. So AFT collaborated with the Chesapeake Conservancy to create restoration reports for women participating in the learning circles. Restoration reports are customized site-specific GIS analyses that include soil, land use, hydrology, a tailored list of conservation professionals in that particular area, and specific recommendations for priority stewardship actions for that parcel of land. In addition to making this tool available to the women who participated in the learning circles, we also trained more than 20 service providers and conservation professionals on how to use this tool for and with the farmers and landowners they support. All right, next slide. So AFT was able to leverage funding from another source to support this project. And through that funding, we conducted a survey of non-operating landowners in Pennsylvania to better understand the decision-making processes of non-operating landowners in managing their land and to identify ways to remove barriers to implementing conservation practices on leased lands. The survey indicated a significantly higher level of non-operating landowners in Pennsylvania that live on the land that they rent or near, very close to the land that they rent, compared to other states across the country. These farmers, these landowners in Pennsylvania also have vast farming experience compared to other states. So either through farming personally or through helping their family farm. So this strong connection to the land and familiarity with farming provides really unique opportunities to carry out targeted and specialized outreach to landowners and farmers, as well as the type of educational resources that we offer them. So this information helps shape our outreach to non-operating women non-operating landowners who participated in the learning circles. All right, next slide, please. So in total, we reached 91 women landowners and farmers. 32 of those women participated live in our virtual learning circles and received training, assistance, and a whole bunch of resources to plan and implement conservation practices on their farmland. We had close to 60 women who registered for our learning circles, but were unable to join us live for those learning circles. They did benefit from the recorded learning circles, and they also received via email and mail the whole slew of resources that the women who participated live in the learning circles received. We had 43 conservation professionals within the 5 counties gain direct experience using the conservation learning circle approach and acquiring new knowledge of the value of outreach to women landowners and farmers and skills on how to potentially adapt some of their programming to better reach this audience. Next slide, please. According to pre and post surveys completed by the Learning Circle participants, women gained significant new knowledge and confidence about the positive impacts of conservation and how conservation assistance programs work and how they can access them. Next slide, please. Participants also reported that they were very likely to take action following the learning circle. And you can see the variety of different actions here that these women anticipate making or taking after the learning circles. We also heard from NRCS and other service providers. They reported that they benefited from the learning circles as well by increasing their knowledge about the unique needs of women landowners and farmers, having an increased awareness of how their services can be tailored for women farmers and landowners, and how to improve outreach to this audience. Next slide, please. So some of the most important learning that the women participants indicated at the end of the learning circles was just the knowledge about what entities are out there and what services they provide. It was pretty amazing. You could physically see the look of relief on many of these women's faces as we talk about all of the different entities and services that are available to them and available to them mostly free of charge. Then there was also a lot of confusion about, whoa, there's so many resources available to me. How does this all fit together? So that's what we spent a lot of time with during the learning circles. Another important learning was just the exchange of ideas between women. Again, providing an opportunity for women to kind of share their challenges and to talk about what's working and what's not working. Another learning was really the importance of setting aside time in a real consistent and intentional way to plan for and think about their farming operation, to have it be less reactive and more intentional and planned. And then finally, just to have a sense of, just kind of scratching the surface in terms of the variety of resources that are available to them. Tim, let's go to the next slide and see, we might, okay. Can you go back one? I'm sorry. Thank you. So in terms of some of the challenges that we faced, this is obviously not a unique challenge to AFT, but the COVID pandemic really posed some very significant challenges for us in implementing this project. As I mentioned earlier, AFT originally planned to host these 5 learning circles in person. We also had planned farm tours for women and spent a significant amount of staff time and capacity planning multi-day in-person events, only to switch to virtual when it was determined that meeting in person simply was not a safe and viable option. So the shift from in-person to virtual learning circles and farm tours was pretty significant and resulted in a considerable increase in staff time and capacity. I know you all have experienced similar things in your work in the past 18 months as well. Another challenge associated with the shift to virtual was that many local and state service providers didn't have access to a work computer when working from home for the first several weeks or months of the pandemic. And this made it really challenging and time-consuming to communicate with and engage them as we pivoted from in-person to virtual learning circles. Finally, another challenge was the video conference fatigue that I think we all have experienced during the pandemic, which affected attendance and engagement by women. And in some cases, there were women who were very interested in participating in the learning circles, but could not do that because they simply didn't have reliable internet access. So we found other ways to try to accommodate them through phone conversation and mailing and emailing a lot of resources as well. So while there were challenges to the virtual learning circle model, there were also several benefits too. We learned that the virtual model can be effective. And to support the virtual model, we created some really compelling, professionally made farm tour videos. Tim, next slide, please. These are videos that included interviews from the conservation professionals in each of these counties, which normally would have happened in person during the learning circle. And they also highlighted and interviewed women farm owners and operators in those counties, talking about the conservation practices that they implement on their farms and some of the challenges and benefits that they have experienced from that. So these videos have been a really helpful tool for women who participated in the learning circles and beyond. We've heard from many women how powerful these videos have been and how helpful they are. So while we weren't able to do this in person, now we have these videos that we can use and have been using well beyond the learning circle events themselves. So that's exciting. AFT, in terms of sharing our lessons learned, we've promoted this work through a series of communication vehicles, through articles in local newspapers, through an interview, through on-farm radio and a podcast that we estimated reached 100,000 listeners in Pennsylvania and 9 other states on the Eastern Seaboard. Our partners were very active in helping promote the learning circles. We had implemented an extensive social media campaign, primarily through Facebook and Instagram. Our partners were very closely involved in promoting through their social media channels as well. And we estimate having reached about 100,000 people just through the social media channels. Next slide, please. AFT highlighted 5 learning circle participants and their conservation stories through Stories from the Field profiles. These profiles feature women and the challenges that they face as farmers and landowners and how the learning circles have helped them realize their conservation vision for their land. Next slide, please. And in addition, we also created a fact sheet that captures our lessons learned and strategies and resources to engage women landowners and tenant farmers in conservation learning circles. These strategies focus on outreach and recruitment, training, facilitation, and evaluation and support. We've made this fact sheet available to service providers and partners in Pennsylvania and across the country through outreach and workshops and our website. I'm happy to share any of these resources should they be helpful to you and your work or simply of interest. Just let me know. And then our final slide, Tim. So none of this work would have been possible without the many really important partners for whom made this work really successful. NRCS obviously was a key partner in this. The other folks that you see here on this slide were also key partners. And as I mentioned earlier, we had more than 60 partners engaged in the learning circle. So this just captures a very small number of all of the partners that were critical to the success of this project. And this project has really created a foundation for a scalable program that's supported by state and local agencies that seeks to really engage women in agriculture in deeper ways in terms of implementing conservation practices. AFT and our partners are very excited to be launching a new set of learning circles. And rather than jumping from county to county, we're developing a cohort of women farmers within the Susquehanna River Basin and leading them through a series of 6 in-person and virtual learning circles and farm tours focused on soil health. So we're very excited to be experimenting with this new model and going much deeper and providing more substance in that training to women. So I'll pause there. Thank you again to NRCS and our many partners, and thank you for your time today. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jamie, one question that came in, would you be able to share the link or the website where these materials and videos can be found?
I can. There are several links. Tim, would it be, I'll work on that while we're together here today. If I am unable to collect all of those, can I send them to you for distribution?
Yeah, we can get them out and we can post them on the website too, where the presentations are posted. So that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you.
And this
Jamie,
is Susan
thanks.
Perry. Oh, whoops. This is Susan Perry. I just wanted to commend Jamie on all your work on this coming in the second year. Jamie, you did a wonderful job in presenting this today and in leading the project from the start, from when you came in. So thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful job.
I was going to say the same thing, Jamie. Thank you as the CIG program manager. Thank you for your work on that project, and we look forward to working with you again.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And the videos are very good if you have a chance to click on those. They're enjoyable to listen to, and they give you some good insight. So thank you again, Jamie. Moving on, we have Joe Sweeney, and Joe's going to present today on the Legacy Sediment Decision Support Tool, which was also funded. A portion of the tool was funded with the NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant. So, Joe, are you out there?
Joe, I see you, but it looks like you're muted.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you
can hear you.
Yeah, I thought you muted me, Tim. Well, anyway, thank you very much. There's a lot of information here, so I'm just going to do a little housekeeping. One, Water Science Institute is independent of Franklin and Marshall. We have a separate board. We partner with Franklin and Marshall, with scientists at Franklin and Marshall, but the institute is separate from Franklin and Marshall College. Just housekeeping there. I guess the second thing I want to do is I want to thank, this was a bear of a project. There's a lot of data that was collected, and there's a lot of, with COVID, as Jamie, alluded to, and everyone knows, there were a number of pivots that had to be made. So I want to thank Ashley, Susan, Marcy, Denise, and especially Pat for their assistance throughout the project. And then as late as last night and early this morning, Tim and Ted for working through some technical issues that we all had. So I'm quickly going to go through the PowerPoint because I'm not going to be the main speaker here. I shouldn't have the headline. Instead, it will be Evan Lewis, who's been with the Institute almost since it was founded 5 years ago. He took a couple of years off for grad school and has now come back to work full-time at the Institute and will be doing most of the presentation. There's a number of people that aren't on the call that are we're part of the team to put this together. Dorothy Meritz and Bob Walter, Franklin and Marshall, Mike Ronis at Topomatrix, and then most of the data collection was done by Evan, who started it, Shelby Sawyer, Logan Lewis, and others filled in here and there. So just quickly, before we get to the main part of this presentation, slide 1 is our fact sheet, and I want you to take note of the QR code that we have attached to the fact sheet itself. These QR codes are amazing, and the pandemic, if it did anything positive, it made people more aware of how to access them with their smartphones. And with the new generation of smartphones, we think that this is an important part of future conservation, exploration, and communication. So if you will go to the next slide, Evan. That's the back of the 2-pager explaining the project and also the impact of legacy sediment on landowners and how the Chesapeake Bay and local water quality is impacted by legacy sediment. If you click on that second QR code, it'll take you to a separate story map that was created that shows the links between all these things. The great thing about the QR code process, and we plan to incorporate it wherever we can, is it turns a piece of paper into a really dynamic, interactive tool for use by anyone who has just curiosity or practical applications. Next slide. You can go through these very quickly, Evan. These slides are just representative highlights of the different. Keep moving through the slides. That you will see in the presentation and how they all connect together. But we wanted to have them in the PowerPoint so that if others wanted to look at them in more detail, they'd understand what was in the presentation we're about to make. And then finally, we have a report, a typical report that we make, and there's an example of that in there that shows how all of this information is analyzed and memorialized for use by a landowner and or conservation professional, an RCS, an agency, whoever would want to use it. But it shows how all this information, all this data comes together and can be applied to anything from a single parcel of land or a part of a parcel of land all the way through an entire watershed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Evan, who's going to get into the main presentation.
And Evan, I'm not hearing you if you're talking.
I think he's trying to get it loaded.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Evan, it might help to shut the video. The
Can you hear
camera
me now?
off. Might kind of put the cameras, turn them off to see if we can save bandwidth.
See, Evan, do we have you? Not hearing you, Evan.
Can you hear me
And
now?
yeah, I hear you now, and I don't know if you heard our suggestion, but if you wouldn't mind turning off your camera, it might help
Okay.
save some bandwidth.
Great. Yeah, sure thing. There we go. Okay, great. Glad that you can all hear me. I'm going to be sharing my screen in a second. Great. Can you all see this screen here? It says data guide.
I do see it, Evan. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, excellent. There we go. Hi, guys. My name is Evan Lewis. I'm with the Water Science Institute. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this presentation. I'm going to be showing you guys the Legacy Sediment 2.0 enhanced mapping and decision support tool that the Water Science Institute has been working on for quite a while now. This was funded by a conservation innovation grant. And the idea behind it is that we would like this platform to facilitate in decision-making and prioritization when it comes to selecting sites that can be restored or have DMPs implemented on them. So this tool operates as a way for watershed practitioners to come in, look at a whole series of different data sets and make informed decisions on how they want to continue with their prioritization efforts. So the way that I'm going to break through this presentation is first, we're going to talk about some of those discrete data layers that WSI has accumulated here in one place and gathered and made. And then later on, we're going to hop into an example in Lebanon County, and we're going to see how all these data layers come together and can help in that informed decision-making process. So first of all, our first relevant data layer to this would be our historic dam layer. So users can come in here, they can take this layer and they can drop it right down into our 6-county map. And again, the focus of our study is here on Franklin, Cumberland, Dauphin, Lebanon, Adams, and York County. And as you can see, users can come in, they can interact with any of these mill dams that we have mapped and click on them and learn a little bit of information as to the name of the dam, the type of dam, its exact location, latitude and longitude, as well as the year it was sited, in what atlas, as well as whether or not that particular mill dam has been breached. So this is a interesting and really important feature for watershed practitioners to be aware of, because whether or not a dam has been breached or whether it's still standing can be an important determination as to the kinds of DMPs that will be most effective at that site, and also the legacy sediment history of that site. So again, users can come here, they can examine the data set that we've built, and they can use this as it relates to their specific projects. Again, yeah, and see if these dams are still standing. The Water Science Institute has also developed stream center lines for these counties that you see before you. And these stream center lines were developed from 1 meter DEM. And when you compare these stream center lines with those typically used to visualize center lines at this scale, typically the NHD National Hydrography data set, that data set in particular was developed using 10 meter DEM. So the kind of resolution that we can pull from these stream center lines is much greater than what you'd find from the NHD data set. And we were able to build it using a combination of open source and private codes and scripts. And I'll get into a little more detail in the future as to exactly how these stream center lines can be used, and also how important they become when it comes to making determinations as to erosion potentials from sites, as well as making volume calculations based off of those processes. So we'll move on. We also have a canopy height model. So users can come in and they can zoom into any area in the 6-county map, and they can explore the data set for themselves, and they can see where canopy exists and make determinations as to the density of it at any particular spot. So for instance, certain BMPs require certain things from the canopy at a site. Should you be interested in developing a riparian forest buffer, you would be interested in finding a spot that was conducive towards having a riparian buffer developed. So a user can come in here, they can compare sites of interest, they can look at the canopy, and they can make those determinations for themselves when selecting sites that they would like to practice or go in and install a BMP. This layer was generated using first return LiDAR data. So yeah, users can come in, and as you can see, it's a very detailed layer, and a lot can be kind of just determined from looking at it and incorporating this data layer in with other data layers that we'll be talking about in the future. Okay, so that's some of our countywide data. We also have an erosion hotspot layer. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of some of our data layers that we have available here. So as you can see here, we're looking at the 6-county map from before. We've broken up the area.
Hey, yeah. Evan, we might just want to pause it a minute. It's really slow, and
okay.
We're still on the canopy model. Now, okay, now we're at the hotspot.
Oh, thanks so much for pointing that out. Yes. Yeah, I'll go slow so this can update. Yeah, so right here, we're looking at that 6-county map from before. Instead, now we're looking at the Huck-12 watershed as discrete units. And the color of the watershed is representative of the volume of erosion that we've mapped within that Huck-12 watershed. And we've done this through a process called DEM differencing. And I'll get into a little bit more detail as to what exactly DEM differencing entails. But for now, users can come, they can click on any one of these Huck-12 watersheds, and they can easily pull up some metrics as to the volumes and mass of erosion that we've calculated within the confines of any of these discrete Huck-12. So for instance, right here, a user can come in and they can see that, there's a maximum erosion rate of 1,390 tons per year coming out of this watershed, and easily compare it with metrics from anywhere else in this 6-county map. And again, the color represents the cumulative volume of erosion that we've mapped within it. And so just at a glance, this map can be used for countywide prioritization efforts so that you can quickly identify areas where restoration potential would be the greatest. So for instance, up here in Lebanon, we're seeing 2 counties, both with exceptionally high erosion that we've mapped within those 2 Huck-12 watersheds. So I said earlier that we come to this through a process called DEM differencing. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about what that process actually entails. So just in case some of us aren't aware, a DEM, or a digital elevation model, is a 3D map layer that is generated using LiDAR data in this case. And so when I say DEM differencing, essentially what I'm saying is the subtraction of one digital elevation model from another. So as you can see from this illustration, we're looking at 2 DEMs. One was taken from data collected in 2014, and the other was taken from data collected in 2008. When we difference these 2 layers from each other, we're taking 2 discrete snapshots in time, and we're looking at the differences between those 2 periods of time. So here in figure 1, this is an example of a valley bottom. The LiDAR that you're seeing here was flown in 2008, And as you can see from this image, there is a mill dam still present at this site. So for those of us who maybe are not used to looking at this kind of raster information, this light pink color down here represents an area of lower elevation, and up here, this would be slightly perched above it. So in this image,
Evan, hold up just
Yeah.
a minute, so,
Okay.
because it's still
Oh,
taking a bit.
huh, okay. Can you see this this colorful image here of a valley bottom? Figure 1?
Of a volleyball, we see a 1, 2, 3 across.
Okay, excellent.
that.
Yeah. So in
That
figure
helps.
1, right, okay. So in figure 1, we're looking at an image, a DEM flown in 2008, where the light pink represents areas of low elevation and the darker pink represents areas of higher elevation. So when we compare figure 1 with figure 2, we can see that figure 2's DEM was flown in 2014. So in between 2008 and 2014, we can see that this mill dam has been removed and there's been steep incision meandering all the way up the valley bottom that we would designate this as erosion. So in figure 3, through the process of DEM differencing, what we're looking at here is a polygon representative of that change. So this red shape that you see in figure 3 is interactable. It represents a volume as well as an area, and it can be quantified. And this is the kind of process that we take in order to map erosion over these large areas of interest. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. I'll try and be kind of slow about it and let the computer update itself. Hopefully you're all looking at this image here. It's a grayscale DEM map. And on it, you should be seeing examples of those erosion polygons from before. So as you can see here, each of these polygons has a volume associated with it by that black text above it, as well as the error that we've calculated for each of these discrete polygons on a polygon by polygon basis. This is an example from Big Beaver Creek, PA. So I hope that kind of explains the process through which we are coming to determine erosion over our study areas. And now we're going to continue on through our story map and talk a little bit about the watershed mapping that we've been performing in these 6 counties. Just gonna give it a second to update. Okay, so in front of you, you should be seeing the 6 county map from before. We decided to focus in our efforts on one priority watershed from each of these counties. And for the upcoming examples that we're going to be discussing, we're going to be looking at Lebanon County. So we can just zoom in on Lebanon real quick. Users can quickly hop between any of these tabs as they so choose, looking at any of the 6 counties that they wish. But for this example, we're going to be looking at the Little Swatara Creek watershed, which is a 39 square mile watershed in Lebanon County. So before we do that, though, I'm going to very quickly go over our stream center lines and compare them with the National Hydrography Datasets stream center lines. So as you can see here in this watershed, let's zoom in a little bit so that you can really see the detail here. The red lines that you see in front of you are representative of the NHD dataset. These are stream center lines. And when you take this interactive window and scroll it over, you can see how WSI stream center lines differ. So the important thing to note here is that through WSI's workflow of generating stream center lines, we're able to capture a lot more detail in these contributing streams and tributaries that lead into the larger stream center lines captured by the NHD dataset. And this becomes really useful for our purposes as well as for watershed practitioners' purposes, because having these stream center lines is the first step towards being able to make a lot of the calculations and manipulations that we do with these data sets in order to find erosion and volume estimates. And just as another example, here's another length of stream. And as I pan this window over it, you can see that the stream center lines generated by the Water Science Institute are able to capture these delicate meanders in this channel here, as well as the contributing channels and streams leading into it. Whereas the NHD dataset really, although it captures the main channel to some extent, doesn't get any of those contributing channels and does lose a lot of detail in the delicate meanders in the valley bottom. So that's just an example of our stream center lines, how they compare with the NHD dataset. And this becomes very important for our purposes because we use this very accurate stream center line data as a thresholding mechanism for determining true erosion from false erosion. So getting back to the erosion. So here we are again, looking at Lebanon County. I'll give it a second to kind of load for everybody. Hopefully it's loaded. So we should all be looking at Lebanon County. We're looking at Huck 12 watersheds, and the color of the watershed is representative of the volume of erosion that we've calculated within it. Again, each one of these watersheds can be interacted with, clicked on, and users can learn a little something about the volume of erosion that we've determined coming out of any of these watersheds. So moving forward, we are going to hone in on one of the higher priority watersheds in the county that we've determined using this method. And we're going to start dropping our layers into it. So we can take our stream center lines, we can add them to this area of interest. We can then add our historic dam layer. And again, these dams can be interacted with. You can learn their location as well as their breach status. And additionally, you can also overlay our legacy sediment terrace map. So what this layer is this is a layer which represents likely depositional areas for legacy sediment in these watersheds. So a user can go in, can interact with any of these polygons, any of these terrace shapefiles, and get an approximation of the total mass of legacy sediment at any particular site. And this can be useful for anyone implementing a BMP on a property, because you're going to want to be aware of the legacy sediment history of a site, because this can be an important determination as to the success of your project in the long run. It can also be important to simply know how much mobile legacy sediment you have in a site when making determinations as to the type of BMP that you would like to establish at any given area. You can also look at our erosion heat map. So I'm going to give this a second to load. What this is it is another way of visualizing our erosion data, only at a more finely tuned scale. So what this is it's a way to quickly, not sure why this window is popping up here. Okay, sorry about that. What this is it's a way for users to quickly identify areas within a watershed where we have mapped the most erosion. So very quickly, a user can look at this and make determinations as to where the most erosion is occurring within this watershed. So for instance, right here, we can interact with this map and find the hottest spot within this watershed in terms of erosion using these 100 square meter grid cells. And once we've done that, we can actually increase the resolution by reducing the size of the grid cells to 50 square meters. At this point, we should be getting a really clear idea of where erosion is happening within the watershed, and we can use this as a tool to guide our decision-making efforts. And at this point, we can zoom in and we can start to look at the actual discrete data as it exists. So these red shapes that you see in front of you, each one of these can be interacted with so that you can see the amount of erosion in tons per year or cubic meters per year from very discrete points in space. So for instance, this one meander bend here is eroding at a rate of 3 tons per year, whereas just upstream, we are seeing an erosion rate of 2.3 tons per year. And this is information that anyone can use to make determinations as to how quickly a site is eroding. you can overlay the canopy over this layer. And at this point, we're starting to get a very clear picture of the site. We're starting to see where erosion is taking place. We're starting to see where opportunities for riparian buffers may be established. And all this data together is simply helping us to make informed decisions. In addition to this, you can also visualize our erosion data set through looking at it from a parcel scale. So it's the same principle as before, except now we're looking at discrete landowner parcels, and each one has the volume of erosion that we have mapped within it ascribed to each parcel. So again, users can zoom in on high priority parcels and interact with them in order to see how much erosion we've mapped within them. And this is a way that a user can make determinations as to which parcels they should canvass in order to make a short list of high priority sites, and use this as a way to determine where they would like to prioritize their efforts and where they'd like to reach out to for landowner permissions and so forth. Okay, so when we bring it all together, it's kind of nice at this point to take a little step back and think about what it is we're actually observing through the lens of LiDAR and DEM differencing. And if this image loads, there we go. So this here is a nice image of a legacy sediment terrace that has experienced some massive erosion. And this kind of calving is very indicative of legacy sediment erosion in this region. And this is the kind of erosion that we can easily detect through this process of DEM differencing. You can clearly see how that shape may be representative of some of these shape files that we map using DEM differencing. So here, just kind of another example, we have a stream center line, and it's important to consider all of this data when you're making your decision as to where you'd like to target for the BMT. So you can overlay our legacy sediment terrace layer over this. You can overlay the erosion polygons that we've mapped, as well as the mill dam locations. All of these shapefiles can be interacted with so that you can learn more about the volume, the mass, etc. And then additionally, you can overlay the canopy over that. And at this point, you're getting a very clear picture of the site and of all the considerations that you might need in order to make some of your targeting decisions. So everything that we've just gone through is kind of the introduction to our data set. It's been represented as a story map so that anyone can come, they can interact with our data layers, they can learn more about them, how they're made, how they can be used. And at this point, we have our actual data product viewer. So anyone can come here, interact with the viewer, and look at this data in any, in any form that they so choose. So you can basically put down the erosion layer, you can put down the mill dam layer, you can also use block statistics. If this, in order to prioritize where you'd like to start investigating, you can look at the parcel map, you can, put a contour map down, and these are all so that, you can use the data that best suits your needs. We have a soil layer. You can compare sites of high erosion and the types of soils that they're eroding from, as well as additionally the canopy layer. So that's kind of an overview of some of the things that we have available to you. Should you choose, you can also project it over a base layer of aerial photography, and you can use this as a way of generating visuals for communication purposes to landowners or to interested parties. So yeah, I hope that gives you a good idea of the tool, some of the ways it might be used. And at this point, if there are any questions, I would love to answer them. Thank you.
I do, before anybody else has a question. I failed to give credit where credit is due. Well, Evan has certainly given an excellent presentation on the applications. This story map process was developed by Sam Feibel, who was with the Institute for several years, and is just sadly left for grad school at Yale. But I expect him back next summer. But he was the main architect, developer of the story map concept, and and Sam should get a lot of credit.
I would like to take a minute to say thanks to Evan for the lovely presentation, and also Joe and your team for this wonderful tool. I'm excited to see where what all we can do with that. Good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Evan, there were two questions that were posed in the chat, and Joe already answered them, but it probably doesn't hurt to highlight them for everybody. If anybody's not watching the chat. The first question was, how were these counties chosen, and will the tool be expanded to all Pennsylvania? And then Joe, you already answered that it's a pilot project, but we'd like to expand it. We chose sites based on their proximity to the bay and other factors. And then there was a second question, is the potential for erosion and other data directly related to the presence of legacy sediment hotspots or low head other type of dams? And Joe replied that it's a combination of legacy sediment, dam status, and other landform conditions. Not every high erosion site is a legacy site, but in central Pennsylvania, it's more likely than not that some sort of impoundment led to a deteriorated stream segment. So just wanted to make sure everybody saw those answers or heard them.
Can other people ask questions? I don't know how to get on the chat, so I didn't leave anything.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is Deborah Slauson. I had a couple of questions. This is something that can only be accessed, I gather, through your website. Is that the case?
We can send you a link.
So, Jeff?
We can send them
Yes.
a link.
Yeah, we can. So this is accessible online through ArcGIS Online. And yeah, we can provide links to anyone if they are interested in exploring it more.
Deborah,
I would love a link.
if you go on, if you wanted to start, with the QR code, which is why we're starting to put those on there, because it's the easiest way to access it. Just take your phone and take a picture and it ought to come up.
Okay, all right. Are you going to show the QR code again? Oh, I can't do it. I'm actually watching you on my phone. Anyway, so, but I'll probably get to it on the Water Science Institute. There's a link.
Yes. The other, Tim's also, I think, distributing the PowerPoint to everyone.
Great.
Is that correct, Tim?
The presentations are all posted on the State Technical Committee website. And if anybody has issues accessing that website, and I can put it in the chat again here, let me know and we can get that to you.
And we'll post it to our website as well following this.
My additional question would be, is there data available for Maryland? I know you haven't done all the mapping and stuff maybe for it, but is the data available or?
No, I mean, we could develop it, but it's, as Evan went through the process, it's a combination of acquiring the LiDAR data, which is usually publicly available, and then applying it to a specific area.
Okay.
It could be done in Maryland. We're actually talking to Maryland DNR.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
Any other questions for Joe?
Oh, I did have one other one. This is Deborah still. Can you calculate a cumulative deposition or erosion as you go downstream?
Yes, that's what those watershed scale numbers show. I mean, and you could do that for any stream segment.
So you can pick a point of interest and just do it for that.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So Joe, thank you. And this information that Joe has developed has been years in the making. So much appreciate the good work that Joe and all the students at Franklin Marshall have done. We are, so that you know why NRCS has an interest in this. This information, this decision-making tool will be used in the Chickies Creek watershed, where we will be doing a PL56 legacy sediment removal project. And so, as many of you may be aware, we've made a determination to award funds through a planning process, begin the planning to do this work, and then with the idea that the work will be designed and constructed within the next 5 years. So really thank Joe and his team. It's a great decision-making tool for us. It saves a lot of time, a lot of field time just by using this LiDAR and getting these rates of erosion. So very much appreciate all the good work here. Any other questions before we go off?
There's no other questions in the chat, Denise, but there was one question that came in earlier for Jamie, and I'm afraid that I may have missed it. And someone asked, are there ways that the Chesapeake Bay Foundation can help with the circles in the Susquehanna Valley? And additionally, I also mentioned that I did put your video links in the chat, and we'll get those posted on the website too. But Jamie, if that wasn't answered, if you wouldn't mind.
Can you actually tell me how to get to the chat?
If you're in Microsoft Teams, there's a couple buttons at the top of the screen. There's the big red leave button on the top right, and then to the left, there's a series of buttons. The chat would be accessed via, it's a little cloud window with 2 lines in the middle. And if you click on that, that is how we open up the chat. To the left of that are 2 little people icons, and that would be the participant list, but the chat would be the cloud window.
All right, thank you.
That's a wonderful question, and I would love to explore ways that AFT and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation can work together on this upcoming round of learning circles. So if there's a person associated with that or someone that I should follow up with specifically, please let me know, and I will be happy to do so.
Okay, thank you. I can get you that person's name.
Very good. Okay, moving on. Next part of the agenda. Thank you to our speakers, Jamie, Joe, and Evan. Appreciate taking the time today, and thank you for the preparatory work that was involved in preparing for today as well. Right now we have the Urban Subcommittee. Co-chairs Dimka Broswell and Pastor Scott Barkley. Are they on?
Dimka's here. Pastor Barkley had an emergency, and I don't necessarily have much to report from Pittsburgh.
Okay. Dimka, we just wanted to, Tim, first, I wanted to, for the members of the committee, many of you, if you've been with NRCS for about the past year and a half and been into these subcommittees, we have really kicked off under the leadership of Abigail Appleman and Susan Marcourt with our staff, and of course, Dimka and Pastor Barkley as co-chairs, an urban subcommittee. And it's been a very, very dynamic committee. We have hit upon topics that are urban, are social, are conservation oriented, all these things. And so I can't express my appreciation enough. And Dimka, sorry that Dr. Barkley will not be on as well, but you'll be receiving a certificate of appreciation from us in the mail, because we very much appreciate all the outreach that you have done to bring people to the NRCS table to talk about farming and urban issues. And so today we present it on the screen, but we will be mailing it to you. Most of the time I would be presenting at an in-person meeting, but very much thank you for your input and dedication and your willingness to keep on with this project of bringing this urban subcommittee together. For the benefit of the team or the state technical committee members, NRCS again will be putting out $250,000 in the cities of Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, and Philadelphia in an effort to encourage and grow urban farming in those communities. So that doesn't come without a lot of great help by Dimka and others who are outreaching to this group. So with that said, Dimka, is there anything else that you'd like to bring us up to speed on?
I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be on the committee. And thank you for the certificates. I do appreciate that. I'll be forwarding those actually to the Food Advisory Council since, well, there's a lot of positive stuff going on here in Philadelphia through partnerships with PSA, our meetings here for NRCS, the USDA. We seem to be working forwards to draft a conservation district for Philadelphia. There's a lot of moving parts for that, but it seems that a lot of our principal groups, even the principal groups that we have problematic relations with, are very much on board and supportive of the urban agriculture plan. We have wrapped up the urban agriculture plan for Philadelphia, and I believe recommendations have been submitted to the city last week. We haven't heard anything yet. I also want to clarify that gardens and farmers, the nonprofit issue that we've been having in Philadelphia, it is still $1,000. A nonprofit cannot make more than $1,000 on city leased land. Considering how many city agencies lease land for gardens and back and forth, that was kind of one of the key parts of the recommendation, is kind of clarifying how we access land in Philadelphia. I also want to highlight real quick, if I can bring that email up real fast. Pastor Barkley, I just want to kind of put in a little word that he had said to me this afternoon. We've been actually having a conversation back and forth with some of the funding that's been released, certain projects that are really ongoing with a lot of our work groups. But I just want to say that Pastor Barkley and I have a genuine belief that that one of the, if we can solve urban American problem of poverty, using air quotes, we can have a template to solve rural American poverty, air quotes. That now that we have been having these conversations between Pittsburgh and Allentown, we've been meeting a lot and having a lot more education within our own groups, forming work groups, forming local or state organizations with the help of NRCS and USDA funding from other groups that we work with. So it's a lot of positive stuff happening. It's a lot of happening literally as we are speaking right now. I have another meeting to jump into after this meeting. But I believe that we'll be able to solve a lot of our problems now, as well as maybe a blueprint for rural America, and have that synergy between urban and rural where we don't have to have a divide. So it's working. If people want to know what the boots on the ground think, it's working. It's just a lot of work. And having the support of state and federal agencies that want to solve these problems, these systemic problems, is a bonus, is a help. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Dimka.
That was it.
Appreciate the thank you, the report and the update. And next, we'll move on to technical reports. And so we begin with Tim Peters, who's not only our moderator today, but our acting state engineer. So Tim, you want to give an update?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Denise. I appreciate that. Two engineering things that I want to hit. The first one being that we have recently released Design Guide 12, and Design Guide 12 is titled Prescriptive Design Specifications for Non-Diaphragm Post-Frame Buildings. And basically what that means is that is the types of roof structures that we often put on top of roof stacking facilities or on top of heavy use areas to exclude stormwater, to keep it clean. And so this design guide was put together specifically with Pennsylvania in mind. It doesn't remove all of the site-specific design that engineers need to do, but it should be a useful tool in helping us to efficiently provide some engineering design requirements for roof structures moving forward. And if I move to my next slide, so the Design Guide 12 was developed to support the National Frame Building Association's non-diaphragm post-frame building design guide. And that was a document that was developed nationally. And so we took that and we worked with a private engineering firm, and we basically took that and made it into a separate design guide, which is our Design Guide 12, that is right for Pennsylvania. It assumes different design criteria that would be specific to Pennsylvania when it comes to loading, snow loads, wind loads, and other conditions that we typically see in Pennsylvania. And then it gives specific member sizing and specific structure specifications that we would need. And this slide, I think, summarizes well, this is part of the design guide, but it summarizes well the information that's contained within Design Guide 12. So Design Guide 12 was developed for 3 different roof widths, being 40 feet, 50 feet, and 60 feet. And then it was also considers within those 3 different widths, 12-foot tall, 16-foot tall, and 20-foot tall roof structures for clearances. And then it also looks at different conditions such as open sidewalls, closed sidewalls for certain conditions, and then how those posts are supported at the foundation via a pin connection, a fixed connection, or a post that's buried in an embedded column. And the Design Guide 12 is about 40 pages long, but there's thousands of pages of calculations that support it that are available here at our state office. And the actual design guide, it's mainly consists of tables like these, where a designer could go and look up what a 12-foot high, 40-foot wide structure, what the different members would need to be based on those conditions. And so it's a lot of lookup tables, and we feel it's going to be useful to our roof designers. So that is a quick summary of Design Guide 12. It is available on our PA NRCS engineering website, open to the public. Once again, it's not something we're requiring, but it's a useful tool, and we hope that it will help expedite some roof designs by NRCS people and by others working on NRCS projects or conservation projects. So my second engineering update is the construction going on at Beaver Creek, our dam rehab project at Beaver Creek in Chester County. And here are a couple of pictures of the work that's going on. The contractor is 14 or 15 weeks now into construction of Beaver Creek, and they have most recently completed work on the tow drain. That's at the base of the embankment. And they've also, what's that? I think I'm getting some feedback. If you're not muted, I'll ask that somebody mute. As I was mentioning, they also installed a new trench drain to help eliminate some wetness at the bottom of the embankment. You can see in the bottom right picture where there is a big staging area. There's a lot of stone and sand piled, and that is intended for the roller compacted concrete that is ongoing right now at the job. And my next slide shows that. And the roller compacted concrete began on October 11th, and RCC, roller compacted concrete, is a product that's mixed on site. In this case, it's mixed on site. It's placed by dump truck. It's spread in 12-inch lifts, and then it is compacted with a vibratory roller. And we see some of those stages going on in these 3 pictures here. And the RCC is checked for the proper density by nuclear density gauges. So we are out there providing that inspection while this is going on. And let's see, that the next thing they're going to be doing after the RCC is completed is that they are going to be replacing the principal spillway, that upright riser pipe structure in the next, well, that will be the next part of the project. And work on this project needs to be completed and paused, either completed or paused by the end of December, because we do have eagles that nest on site, and that has impacted our timing. There's certain windows that we're allowed to work and certain windows that we're not. So we're working within those allowed timeframes. And I think I have one more slide. Oh, yeah, this is a good picture. We all know that Ida came through, I don't know, a month and a half ago or so. And this is a picture of the dam after Ida had just hit. And you can see that the pool area is pretty full, and it was approaching our emergency spillway, but it did not breach that area, which is good because we had a lot of equipment and products staged in that emergency spillway area where the work is ongoing. That's what I have for an engineering update. So Denise, I can pass it back to you.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate the update, and hope that those design guides, I know Pete Vanderstappen, before he left, he really wanted to make available to NRCS and its partners those roofs and trusses at those specs. So big thanks to Pete. Moving on, Dan Ludwig is actually at an introduction to conservation training today, so he will not be presenting, but we have our state soil scientist, Yuri Plowden, who's here. Yuri?
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen.
Can everybody hear Yuri okay?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hear you well, Yuri.
Whoops, that's the wrong thing. Hold on. Bear with me. Let's see. There we go. Can you see that soil survey update?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, we'll see how this goes. We've been having a slow connection here in the state office. So I just wanted to give you an update on soil survey division. So we have a national bulletin, and basically every year we have an annual soil survey data refresh. And there's updates ongoing all the time and new interpretations. So it makes it easier if just the whole country refreshes the entire database each year. And so how do you know if your soil survey data is new? So you start with Web Soil Survey, and you would go to your area of interest. In this case, it's Dauphin County. And if you, once you define your area of interest, you go to the AOI properties table on the left, and you can see, in this case, what's circled in red, the tabular data is currently version 17, since this was posted digitally over a decade ago. And the data was refreshed August 31st, 2021. So you know that it was refreshed this year, but the spatial data, by contrast, hasn't been updated since 2019 in September. So most of the data changes you won't even notice. The underlying tabular data is being harmonized, so it is consistent across a whole area. In Pennsylvania, Delaware County this past year has had the most updates. They have an active soil survey update program going on there. Basically, they're removing some of the old out-of-date map unit symbols and putting the new modern ones, and they're linking the data to some more complete data sets. We do have new interpretations this year. In the soil health category, there's a new dynamic soil properties response to biochar. Under the land management categories, we have soil suitability for industrial hemp, and also interpretation for drought vulnerable soils. So just to drill down a little bit, the focus on biochar is because biochar is seen as a way to sequester carbon and improve soil health and reduce fuel stocks in forests. It's light and fluffy, so it's prone to movement with wind and water. So in row crops, what the interp looks for is mostly slope. If there's slope that's greater than 15%, then that soil is considered severely limiting for application of biochar. In forests, where there are horizons, organic layers that are populated in our database, those will capture the biochar, and so the soil survey interp will allow up to 40% of slope before a forest soil is considered severely limited. There is a focus on hemp. So industrial hemp is seen as a way to diversify American ag, and hemp seed is useful in a variety of ways, as is hemp fiber. So basically, if a soil can grow corn, it can grow hemp. And so the interp is if it's a soil that's decent for corn, like a prime farmland soil or so, it will also show up as being good for hemp. Also a focus on drought because of climate change, which is going to force us to adapt. So part of that adaptation is identifying vulnerabilities, and some landscapes are inherently more drought vulnerable than others, and some resist. So our very convex, shallow, rocky soils are going to come up as drought vulnerable, whereas our flatter soils that tend to catch water, those will be considered drought resistant. And also those with maybe finer soil textures that have a higher available water capacity, those will come up as more drought resistant. So a couple other new interps on building site development category. There is an interp now for solar arrays with ballast anchor systems and solar-based and solar arrays with soil-based, building site development with soil-based anchor systems also. So if you want any more information about the soil survey data that was updated in your specific county in 2021, you can contact me. I have access to a spreadsheet report that shows every single map unit that was touched. And like I said, there's not a whole lot, but if you want to know specifically in your county, let me know. That's it.
Thanks, Yuri. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on. We're going to have an overview of our financial programs, and I want to thank Scott and his team, Brian and Ashley and Wendy, for all the good work that they've done to get us through the fiscal year. It was not easy. So appreciate all the hard work that they did and our field people, and we will, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Okay, thank you, Denise, and good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate it. Hope everybody's doing well. And as Denise mentioned, I'm going to provide you with basically a financial program overview, looking at the last several years, get into some specific programs, and then other fiscal year 2022 opportunities that we could be hopefully having here in the near future. And then following me will be our new Hfrp program manager, Ryan Cornelius. We welcome him, and we're so glad he's on board. He's been hired since July, since we last met as the State Technical Committee, and he's filled the shoes of Ed Sanders, as many of you may recall Ed. And then following him will be Ashley Lennox. She's our CSP program manager, as well as CIG and NWQI, those programs as well. Jim Gillis is on your agenda. He unfortunately can't be here as well. He's in the same training as Dan Ludwig is. So I'll just be providing you with some brief bullet points on CREP update. There's not many, but just to share those with you. So as you see on this first slide, I'm going to be basically just talking really quick about financial programs, give you a brief overview, some things we encountered that benefited some landowners as far as the payment opportunity for increased cost, but also the Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry program that's part of Hfrp. And then last but not least, like I said before, other fiscal year 22 funding opportunities. So next slide, please, Tim. So what you see here is just a snapshot of the funding across Pennsylvania for these four programs: AMA, CSP, Hfrp, and RCPP. So not just statewide, but then we honed it in and we broke out the Bay. over the last 4 years. So 18, 19, 20, and 21. It shows you statewide what we obligated, and then also in Bay watershed and the percent of total funding. So basically, to summarize it, PA is obligating an average of, let's just say 30 million statewide, but 19.5 million in the Bay alone, this is excluding any of our easement programs. Next slide, please, Tim. So this slide, basically, you may recall briefly mentioning this in the past. There was an opportunity for our national office, and Denise being at that time acting associate chief was a key part of making this happen. So this ag relief payment was provided or offered to the state of Pennsylvania and landowners for these following criteria and situations. So price spikes that they encountered for calendar year 2021, not fiscal year, but calendar year 2021. So again, due to the extreme inflation costs, materials, if you went to your building center, you've experienced that firsthand, where you saw a price of a 2x4, maybe $10 to $15 a board. But as a result in these inflation costs, there was a lot of hesitation from applicants, landowners, to not only sign a new contract, but then to implement those contracts. So again, NRCS was able to respond with a price adjustment for 7 practices. So this total was tentative about a month ago, and it's looking at those practices that were completed, but also that were planned to be completed before the end of this calendar year. And the next bullet item has those eligible practices that would be eligible for this payment in calendar year 2021. Roofing covers over heavy use areas or waste storage facility, that was the main large cost. But then also irrigation systems, channel bed stabilization, trails and walkways, irrigation pipeline, lined waterways and outlets, and livestock pipelines. So those were the 7 practices that currently our staff statewide is following up on, taking care of any completed practices that are certified and have been done in this calendar year. So just to summarize again, if these 7 practices were completed from January 1st to December 31st of this year, and a minimum payment through what we used as a calculator of $300 or more, they will receive an adjusted relief payment. So I just want to provide you with an update on that. That happened very quickly in a short amount of time, and we were able to implement it to get it out to our landowners. Next slide, please. So this slide talks about our involvement with climate change. Basically, this was the administration and our agency looked at prioritizing practices that would mitigate greenhouse gases and sequester carbon. These practices that I'm going to very briefly go over, I've always been in our toolbox, but they do have significant benefits to mitigating greenhouse gases and sequestering carbon. So last year, you may recall back in July, the last meeting, Pennsylvania had the opportunity, along with 9 other states, to pilot this climate smart agriculture and forestry program in this fiscal year. Outreach was also focused to the historically underserved applicants. And what we were able to do is offer them the soil health practices that you see on the right-hand side. So from June 28th to July 12th, we offered a sign-up in Pennsylvania. 42 applications were received. We also received from our national office an allocation of $400,000 to promote towards this program. And out of those 42 applications, we were able to obligate 15 contracts. So again, from middle July to the end of September, we made a lot of good progress in getting that program implemented. Next slide, please, Tim. So in addition to this past year as a pilot program and moving forward The EQIP Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry Practices for fiscal year 22 will be as followed here in this layout. You have this table, and it includes an overall list. Again, this is a national list that were provided to us of 27 practices. So, however, in Pennsylvania, just wanted to clarify this 27 of this list that's in these categories. Pennsylvania obviously doesn't offer anything in the rice category. So there's 2 practices minus that we will not be offering. But also in our tech guide, we currently do not offer range planting. We don't have range, nor do we offer silvopasture practices. So those 4 practices, 2 from rice category, and then range planting and silvopasture. And then also, just an FYI, the windbreak renovation will be combined into the windbreak shelter practice, 380. So basically, the 27 goes to -5. We end up with 22 practices that, for fiscal year 22, we're looking at offering to the state of Pennsylvania throughout the entire state. So just as an FYI, if you're interested, there's a link there to find this on our website, this information from Climate Smart, and also this table. Thank you. Next slide, please, Tim. So then moving forward, and other funding opportunities for fiscal year 22. Besides our general ones that we have with AMA, CSP Renewal, CSP Classic, the EQIP program, they're again going to offer this opportunity for the Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry program. In addition to that, again, you may have recalled back in maybe the spring or summer during one of those meetings, I might have introduced to you EQIP Conservation Incentive Contract, CIC. That was going to be possibly introduced to us as a pilot program. It was pulled back to help the states affected by the drought out in the western part of the country. However, this is going to be another opportunity for funding opportunities in fiscal year 2022. Climate or EQIP CIC is different from Climate Smart, different from EQIP General, in that, if you can remember this, if you can imagine a stepping stone, a bridge, if you will, a transitioning from our EQIP Classic program to CSP. It's to help those interested landowners with other additional practices and enhancements. And last but not least, other possible funding opportunities for fiscal year 22. We're hearing a lot of good information coming from our headquarters that there could be, as a result of some other programs that are coming out, but Chesapeake Resilient Farms Initiative could be one of them. Our partners, Chesapeake Bay Commission, are really supportive of this. Again, that really could add a significant amount of funding to our already received initial allocation. So that's basically it. I did want to cover just a couple quick points, Tim. Maybe my next slide would be questions. But in addition to that, just wanted to forward a quick couple notes from Jim Gillis. He every year is involved with working closely with the Farm Service Agency. He's in the process of always evaluating and updating county average rental rates, soil rental rates, but also their payment scenarios for the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. So Jim wanted me just to pass along that there was no major questions, no major changes. So he's feeling that the program will continue to roll out as it has been in years past. So that's all I had. I appreciate the time. Unless there are questions, if not, I would like to turn it over to Orion Cornelius. Again, he's our EQIP program manager, with a brief update on programs from this past year and looking forward. Ryan, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I am. This is my first State Technical Committee meeting, so thank you, and have some brief updates on EQIP and AMA for fiscal year 21. Tim, can you go to the next slide, please? So just some numbers from the past year. In EQIP, we spent $22,248,825, and we wrote 475 contracts. An AMA, a little over $550,000 for 16 contracts. RCPP equip, we did just under $800,000 in 6 contracts, and in RCPP 18, we did just under $1 million with 10 contracts. And it was a busy year, and we look to have a even better year this coming year. Can you go to the next slide, Tim? And just some initial allocations that we've received as far as just to get the ball rolling here this year. In Equip General, we've received $21,142,000. Another $1 million on top of that for Golden Wing Warbler, and $883,000 for NWQI. And initial number for AMA is $362,000. So these numbers, again, they are initial allocations. There will be opportunities for more here this year, but these are the numbers they give us here out of the gate to focus on to get the ball rolling this year. But otherwise, I think my next slide is just questions. So unless anybody has any questions, go ahead, Ashley.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you, Ashley.
Okay, so I'm going to just give an update on the programs that I manage, and here we go. So I'm going to talk about accomplishments from our past fiscal year, and then our initial allocations for fiscal year 2022, very similar to what Ryan just covered. For our accomplishments, we have various sub-programs under the Conservation Stewardship Program. So GCI at the bottom there, you can see, stands for the Grassland Conservation Initiative.
Ashley, were you trying to share your slides? Because they're not coming through.
Oh, okay. Wait. Sorry about that.
And if you want, I can share them.
No, here we go. I got ahead of myself, I think. You seeing anything yet?
It's loading.
There it should be.
I see your PowerPoint.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. And thanks, Tim, for making me aware of that. So here we go. GCI stands for Grassland Conservation Initiative. We did 5 of those on over 101 acres for a little over $9,000 this past fiscal year. CSP renewals, which are renewals of existing contracts. So it's continuing contracts that we have and picking up additional enhanced conservation. We did 46 of those, over $3 million on over, well, close to 26,000 acres. And then for CSP Classic, or the Conservation Stewardship Program, the regular program, we had 147 contracts funded on close to $5 million on over 31,000 acres. So I just wanted to review those numbers for what we did this past fiscal year in that program. And then Ryan mentioned Environmental Quality Incentives Program, a sub initiative under that is the National Water Quality Initiative. So we had 14 contracts there for over $1 million. And we actually did additional work in those areas, just a few more contracts under standard equip because we didn't have quite enough funds. Conservation Innovation Grants, we funded 2 of those at the end of the fiscal year that we'll be working with in the future. And you got to hear some folks that had finished theirs up recently. So those were awarded to Rodale Institute for growing industrial hemp as a multi-purpose crop in PA organic cropping systems, and American Farmland Trust for Women for the Land, helping women farmers and landowners advance soil health in PA. So we're excited to be working with those 2 groups on soil health through the Conservation Innovation Grants. And then we will plan to host a CIG competition for fiscal year 2022 and keep the same priorities we developed last year. And you can see those listed here: soil health, water quality, urban farming, and non-industrial private forest land. And then for initial allocations, Our initial allocation for CSP Grassland Conservation Initiative is based on the number of applications we receive. So right now we only have 2 in our system. So I haven't gotten a allocation or money for that yet. But for CSP Classic, it will be 6 million. CSP Classic Organic, which is a separate pot of money, 300,000. CSP Renewals, 3.5 million. And then EQIP NWQI. First year we had a large number, but last year and this year we're at this little bit less than 885,000. So I'll try to get some more, request some more money in there if we can. And then Conservation Innovation Grants actually falls under the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and we look to put aside 250,000 for those in the coming year. So I have up here questions and comments. So while you're typing those in or thinking of them, I'm going to bring up something else I was asked to share. And I think my screen is still sharing, correct, Tim?
That's correct. Looks good.
Okay. So this was something, I can't take credit for this because I was on leave last week, but Marcy, Scott, and Denise, I believe, worked on this source water protection efforts in Pennsylvania. And this is a sheet that we've been giving to some of our partners. We have a lot of get a lot of questions on what are we doing for source water in Pennsylvania. So you can see here that between 2016 and 2021, there was over 62 million obligated. So contract money set aside for source water protection watersheds, which was 35% of the funding. We have a picture here of the high priority source water protection areas, as well as the funds obligated by year in those areas, contract dollars obligated and where it went in those source water watersheds, as well as where our National Water Quality Initiative watersheds are located, how many contracts we funded on how many acres and the dollar amount, and then some information here on work in the Bay across our programs. So I'm not going to say any more about that. That is saved with the rest of these presentation materials on the site. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and thank you for your time. Were there any questions?
Sorry, no questions in the chat, Ashley.
Okay, thanks again.
Thanks, Ashley. This is Scott again. Hey, Tim, Denise asked me to just update the technical committee here on the status of our buffer, riparian buffer spec. Just wanted to provide an update. This was presented to the technical committee, I think, about a year ago in regards to a minimum buffer width. So basically, I'll just summarize it like this, and this is on our ePhotog, again, riparian buffers standard 391. So to reduce, if there's going to be additional criteria of a resource concern to reduce overland flow, transport of sediment and organic material, to improve quality or terrestrial aquatic habitat for wildlife, the minimum width will still be the same, 35 feet, okay, under those additional criteria. However, if it's to treat water bodies, if the additional criteria is to treat water bodies that are threatened by transport of pathogens, chemicals, pesticides, or nutrients in the surface water or groundwater, then the minimum horizontal width needs to be 50 feet. So that can be accomplished by the 50, easily done by that, or adding an associate practice that treats the targeted resource concern. An example would be a filter strip or a field border. So again, this standard was just updated, and it's now officially on ePhotog. Again, riparian forest buffer. So there are situations or when there's additional criteria that it still is, the minimum width will be 35 feet. However, there is an additional criteria that I just reviewed there at the end where it would need to be a minimum of 50 feet. So I just wanted to forward that or provide that to the State Technical Committee, just so you're aware. That's all I have. That's some questions.
See, Denise stepped out, so if there are no questions, then we will move on. Thank you, Scott. We'll move on to the Agricultural Conservation Easements Programs with Hathaway Jones. Hathaway, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Awesome. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. And I have the easements update for this meeting. The first thing on my list is that we have completed our draft rankings for Hfrp, WRE, WRE bog turtle, and ALE. And those were released to you in the handouts for this meeting. So I'm not going to go over them today, but feel free to review them. And if you have questions or comments, let us know. The easement staff are happy to get feedback on those ranking forms from everybody. And then I'm going to move on to our fiscal year 21 end of year wrap up. We have regular ALE, ag land easements, and we closed or acquired 4 of those, totaling 372 acres and $542,000. We closed on 2 wetland reserve easement, regular wetland reserve easement projects, and that would be non-bog turtle. And they were a total of 100 acres for about $347,000. And then we had a busy year.
Kathleen,
Yeah.
1 second. Are you sharing? Trying to share?
No, I'm not.
Or you? Okay,
I'm not
good.
sharing anything. I have this thing I typed up.
No, that's fine. I just wasn't seeing a slide, so I wanted to make sure you weren't trying to share.
Where is my? No. Yeah. Wait. Nope. Let me find it and bring that up. I just had it. No.
Hathaway, I probably have
I got it. Okay, here it is. Okay, so you guys should all be seeing that. These are just my notes, nothing too formal. It might help though to see the numbers instead of just hearing me rattle them off. So, like I said, these are our closings. You can see ALE, WRE for 2021, and then we have enrollments for 2021. ALE, we did 8 ALE regular enrollments. That's the ag land program, 463 acres and just over $1 million. And then we had an RCPP project where we enrolled 3 ag land easement projects, and those totaled 523 acres and $785,000. And the regular ALE, one of those farms, and the 3 RCPP ALEs are part of a large landholding in Adams County for grazing land. So we're getting a nice, kind of a nice block of acres in that local area that will be preserved, which is really nice. So that 523 acres that you see for RCPP ALE, that's all the same farm. It was just different properties, so we had to separate it into 3 easement enrollments. So that's pretty cool for ALE for this year. And then we're going to move down to 2022. We have our allocations already. In ALE, we received just over $1 million. And for WRE easements, we received $517,000. And this year, similar to 2021, we also received a separate pot of funding just for stewardship activities. That would be maintenance and repairs on our older easements that have already closed and already been restored, our wetland easements. And that's going to help us maintain things that break and vegetation that needs, taken care of, noxious and invasive species where maybe the landowner is struggling a bit to take care of themselves. And of course, we like to go out and maintenance our already restored bog turtle easements about every 5 years to help keep those habitats in pristine condition for the turtles. So that's the stewardship funding that you see there, and it is now given to us in a separate allocation. I will say, if the ALE allocation seems a bit low, we are also working with the RCPP program, and we have a $10 million RCPP agreement to do easements. And so we figured that with that funding, in addition to our regular ALE funding, we'll be quite busy. And that $10 million is for ag and forest easements. We've set our 2022 deadlines for easements. This is all easement programs. We're going to try to keep them on the same schedule, whether it's RCPP, HFRP, WRE, or ALE. So these are our deadlines. Tentative, of course, these are flexible. These are state-derived deadlines. So we have a little flexibility here, but this is a guide to keep us on track to make sure we get everything finished that we need to do before we are cut off at the end of the fiscal year. I'm not going to read through those. You guys can see those on my notes. And then if you notice in our enrollments tally for 2021, we had 0 for WRE. We had quite a few interesting parcels, but we didn't have any that kind of fit what we were looking for eligibility-wise for the program. And some of those may move forward and get funded in 2022 if we can work out the issues, but some of them were just not a good fit. So we had a lot of applications, but nothing that filtered out to be an actual project. And that brings me to our outreach plan for WRE. I think we've probably mentioned this here or there to a lot of you over the past year. We've been really working on formulating the plan, working together, and with our field offices to strategize, and we're finally actually getting the nuts and bolts of this rolled out so that we can see this plan turn into actual WRE applications. And so what we've done most recently, we have a new brochure and a common restoration practices fact sheet, and a landowner outreach cover letter that field offices can use to target potential applicants when they find a parcel that looks like it's a good fit for WRE. And in general, parcels that are good fits, we kind of do that research with GIS layers, and the best characteristics for an eligible WRE seem to have flat topography, a large percentage of hydric soils, and current agricultural use, cropping, pasture, haying, so that we can see that those soils the hydric soils are in use for something other than a wetland, which is what they used to be before agriculture was established. We also have some other criteria. We want to build corridors, so we like it when a parcel is close to other preserved land. We have some watersheds across the state that we feel are important targets for implementing easements. So those are another flag for us. Of course, for the bog turtle in the southeast, we want parcels that have known populations of bog turtles. And so we're working with some of our partners to get those property locations so that we can reach out to those landowners and see if they're interested in the program. Frequently flooded parcels are also good candidates potentially. And other important habitats for threatened and endangered species that we may come across or see in connection with all of these other characteristics that we would look at. Those are kind of the parcels we're targeting with our outreach, and we are moving out. We're gonna start mailing letters to landowners for parcels that we feel are good fits, and we're hoping to have a little bit of success there, getting some new WR easements in the door. And then I'm going to move on to HFRP. If you remember, in 2021, we received about $300,000 in HFRP funding for easements, and that was basically, it's old money, so the only way we are allowed to use that money in Pennsylvania now is if we follow the rules from 2010 and 2011 that we had established for the Indiana bat. And so we're looking for parcels that have Indiana bat hibernacula and maternity colonies or are in close proximity to those areas. And that's only a few counties across Pennsylvania, and I've listed them here. If a parcel's outside of these counties, it's not going to qualify for our Indiana bat Hfrp. And of course, then within that county, we would look at how close the parcel is to an actual hibernacula or maternity colony. And again, if it's too far, it's not going to qualify. But we have some screening criteria, and we, of course, we're not going to share, we don't share the location of those areas, but if an application comes in the door, we're going to research and see if it's in that range that we would consider it for an easement. And so we received our $300,000 last year, but we got it a little after midway through the year, and that was hard for us to find. And we're looking at finding a parcel, doing an appraisal, enrolling it, doing the ranking and all of our documentation to get it in the door. So it was a little late last year. The funding was swept, and we are going to get it back this year and hopefully have more time to vet parcels and find some landowners, one or two, that will be good for Hfrp. And that is the easements update. And I'm ready to take questions if anyone has them about easements.
There's nothing in the chat, Hathaway.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, Hathaway. Appreciate the update. And again, we're really interested, if you know some landowners that may have interest in doing a restoration with us on wetlands, we're certainly, please let us know. Moving on, we have the Regional Conservation Partnership Program update. Is Susan Marquardt out there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks, Susan.
Okay. Today I'm just going to give a short update on the program and where we're at right now in Pennsylvania. In the handout that was posted, we have all of our projects listed since we've begun the program in the 2014 Farm Bill. So in total, we've had 15 RCPP projects total to date. And of those 15, Pennsylvania was the lead state in 13 of them. We have now 5 completed projects, and the agreements there have expired, and those are done. We have 7 that are currently active, which means the agreements are signed and they're in process right now, and we're taking applications and working on those. We have 3 other projects out of those 15 that are currently under negotiation. So those projects are not ready to go yet. We're in the process of putting all the information together. And once the agreement is signed, then we'll be able to start working on those. If you look at the amount of funding in these projects, you can see that it's really outstanding. So we have had more than $70 million of NRCS funds that have been put into these 15 projects. And that is also matched with almost $137 million in total partner contributions. So that's a big match. That's almost a 2-to-1 match when you look at all 15 of those projects. There are 6 projects in here that are multi-state. So if you want to look at the contributions just from Pennsylvania, you're looking at about $105 million. But that's still a lot of contributions from our partners here in Pennsylvania. So the last thing I wanted to just mention was that we're waiting for a RCPP funding opportunity to be announced. Hopefully that's going to be announced by the end of this calendar year. We've been told that this funding opportunity is going to include both RCPP Classic and the RCPP Alternative Funding Arrangements, which is what we call AFA. And those are going to be combined into one announcement, and I think that's why it's taking a little longer for that to get put together and released. But we are still looking for that, hopefully before the end of the calendar year. We had one recently announced, which is the last program on this list. If you want to scroll down to the 15th project there on the bottom of the page. And that was a new project that was just announced under the alternative funding arrangements. And that project is Healing Mine-Scarred Landscapes via Restoration. Pennsylvania is the lead state. There will be other states involved with that, and our lead partner for that is the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. So that's what I have basically for our CPP. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
There's no questions in the chat, Susan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other further questions or things we should have for next state technical committee? Anything in the chat? Again, if you
Nothing.
have ideas for speakers or you would like to present, please feel free to do so. We're happy to have you on. We do have some speakers for January already, but that doesn't mean that we can't arrange for more. So very much appreciate everybody's time today, and thank you for the contributions, and thanks to my staff for all their good work that they did putting together the updates. So and a big thanks to Tim Peters. He got this role at the last minute today. So thank you, Tim. Very much appreciate it.
No problem. And just
Take
to
care,
highlight
everyone.
the future meetings, Denise, January 19 and April 21, July 19, and October 19th, listed in the bottom of the agenda.
Yep. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.